many more. This 4-month-old boy was found bruised in the debris. No one knows who he is. But 5 couples say he's their child. So much loss, so much desperation on this coast. Many hospitals are destroyed. Medical aid is getting through, but like the food and the water, it's slow in coming, even as the world's donations multiply. But in some places on this coast, there's nowhere left to deliver aid to, and few alive to get it.
This was a world turned upside down in seconds that will stay like this for years, because it's like this for hundreds of miles. Boats in the main street, bodies in the rubble left to rot. An unnatural world that will never be rebuilt as it was.
He's lost his family of 5, but everyone here has his own private hell. They stare at the wreck of their lives. No one, no donation can ever replace their loss on this haunted shore. Bill Neely, ITV News on the eastern coast of Sri Lanka.
As Bill said, the tsunami has left scars no amount of aid can totally heal. Aid has been pouring in, though, from governments around the world and from the public. So, a fortnight after the tsunami, what are the raw numbers that reflect the sheer scale of the disaster? Lauren Taylor has tonight's briefing.
Thank you, Nick. As we said, it's 2 weeks now since the giant waves hit South Asia, and during that time the world has watched in horror as the scale of the disaster has unfolded day by day. The figures seem barely credible. For example, India's number of dead has now reached almost 16,000. In Sri Lanka, the figure is even higher at more than 30,000. Indonesia has lost an incredible 100,000 in the tsunami, the population of a town the size of Grimsby. And as we've mentioned, across the area, it's now thought that some 440 Britons were killed. Extraordinary in its scope, the disaster has also been extraordinary in the global response it's prompted. So far, governments and the World Bank have pledged almost £3 billion in aid. And several countries, including Britain, have offered to freeze debt repayments by the affected nations. The British government has said it will give £53 million so far, and in Tony Blair's words, it will more than match the £100 million donated by the British public. Fine promises then, but will all those countries follow up on their pledges? As the United Nations Secretary-General pointed out earlier this week, history is not on their side. The devastation of the Iranian earthquake in 2003 led to immediate international pledges of more than £17 million. But a year later, only around half of that had been received. The plight of Mozambique's flood victims 4 years ago prompted government promises of £215 million in aid. Less than half of that appeared. But whereas government pledges have to be made good, donations from the public are real and are making a difference.
I can say categorically that the money that the British public have given, and I'm desperate to thank them for their fantastic generosity, is already getting through and will get through. And we have never had to spend more than 2p in the pound on costs. So this time 99p will get through to the people who need it.
But when international attention, which has prompted such generosity, inevitably shifts away from the countries devastated by the tsunami, what's clear is that they will still desperately need money and practical help with reconstruction for months and years to come. Nick.
Lauren Taylor. Other news now. Police investigating last month's £26 million bank raid in Belfast made an extraordinary claim today, one certain to damage the Northern Ireland peace process. Northern Ireland's Chief Constable said he believed the provisional IRA was behind the robbery. From Belfast, Geraint Vincent reports.
The Northern Bank may have plans to recover from this raid, but the same may not be true of the peace process. A political deal here depends on a commitment from the IRA to give up criminal activity. So when the Chief of Police in Northern Ireland accuses it of pulling off the UK's biggest ever bank robbery, that doesn't do much for the chances of agreement. Chief Constable Hugh Ord's officers have made no arrests since the investigation into the robbery began, but he's in very little doubt as to who was behind it.
In my opinion, the provisional IRA were responsible for this crime, and all main lines of inquiry currently undertaken are in that direction.
Is it right that you should risk damaging the peace process in Northern Ireland by speculating about who robbed this bank when your inquiry is so far from its conclusion?
The peace process is a matter for others, and it's a matter for others to speculate on the impact of its statement in relation to the peace process.
Ruthless and well organised, the Northern Bank heist certainly had all the hallmarks of a paramilitary operation, but when the Chief Constable blamed the IRA, he provoked a furious response from the Republican leadership.
He has not produced one scrap of evidence, and those tempted to think that an allegation equals evidence should reevaluate what justice is all about.
The police statement left unionists feeling vindicated over their reluctance to deal with Sinn Féin.
The idea that they could now be part of some political deal when their fingerprints are all over this crime, I think makes a nonsense of their involvement in the political process.
The Prime Minister had been hoping that the two sides of the political divide here might be able to reach a landmark agreement on power sharing before the next general election. That looked unlikely anyway, and in pretty spectacular fashion, the Northern Bank heist has now made such a deal look almost impossible. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Belfast.
Police searching for the missing 22-year-old Sally Geeson say they've found a body. The student disappeared on New Year's Day after leaving a party at a pub near her home. Tonight, forensic teams are combing an area of woodland on the outskirts of Cambridge. Detectives say it's now a murder inquiry. One of America's most infamous unresolved crimes may be a step closer to being cleared up tonight. For 40 years, the families of 3 civil rights workers murdered in Mississippi have waited for justice. Now, at last, a reputed Ku Klux Klan member has been charged with murder. Robert Moore has the details.
The crime was committed 40 years ago, but only today have murder charges been brought against Edgar Ray Killen. Not guilty, he pleaded to the charges of organising the killing of 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi in 1964. A crime that came to symbolise the violent racism and bigotry of the American South during that era.
Mongrel class of people.
James Chaney, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner were all shot as they sought to register black voters. Their bodies buried in mud. Murders dramatised in the film Mississippi Burning.
You had us scared to death, man. Don't you call me man, Jew boy. You don't want him seeing your face.
Oh, it don't make no difference no more.
A few years later, some of the murder suspects were jailed on lesser civil rights violations, but not Killen, who was never convicted. Now new evidence has emerged apparently linking him to the crime that outraged this nation. Some local activists say it's never too late for justice to be served.
These 3 young men were cut down doing righteous work, and they should have justice, and their families should have justice.
40 years on, Killen still insists he's an innocent man. But this is a case that continues to reverberate across America, reminding people of a racist era that many would prefer to forget. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
There's much more to come on the ITV News, including failing to sparkle, Marks & Spencer's new profit warning, and in sport, cup dreams, minnows prepare for their big moment. All that and more after the break.
Don't miss the fantastic savings in the United Carpets and Beds sale.
Welcome back. Christmas is a time when high street sales are meant to sparkle, but it was a grim time for one major retailer. Despite an expensive advertising campaign, sales at Marks & Spencer were down 6% in the last few weeks of the year. Our consumer editor Chris Choi has more.
It's got to be cool and very long.
It was a supremely confident seasonal message. Big stars for a big-name store. But today's announcement from Marks is certainly not the spark from this retailer's Christmas. Sales are down.
Clues to the problems are all around the store. Marks & Spencer had so much stock, the only way they could shift it is through heavy discounting, sale after sale. And although they did pretty well for customers, in fact, a 3% increase, they found it tough to convert browsers into buyers. End result, a 6% dip in sales in this crucial period.
It raises the spectre of one buyer M&S management doesn't want. Billionaire Philip Green's takeover attempt was fought off last year. Now there's speculation he could be back.
I think the possibilities of a takeover attempt on these figures are much more likely than they ever were before.
Another symbol of failure, this life store was supposed to pioneer a new future. It closed down today. So can the new boss hold investors' confidence?
The changes that have been made to buy-in, to merchandising, store layouts, won't have an impact really until the second half of this year. He's got a 6 to 9 month period.
It depends now on shareholders believing a bad start to the year could mark a new start for M&S. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Well, despite those poor results, renewed takeover speculation saw M&S shares rise today. The price was up 3% to £3.48. The FTSE 100 share index, the main measure of shares in London, ended the week on a new 2.5-year high, up nearly 30 points at 4,854. In New York, the Dow Jones index was down nearly 19 points at 10,603, and the pound slipped nearly half a cent to $1.87. Now, with all the sports news ahead of a big FA Cup third-round weekend, here's Felicity Barr.
Thank you, Nick. Well, look at the task facing the non-league sides left in the Cup shortly. First, though, this was the scene at Turf Moor this evening where Liverpool's visit to Burnley was washed out. Torrential rain meant the referee had little choice but to call the match off. So what are the chances of non-league sides Yeading or Exeter reaching the fourth round? Yeading faced Newcastle on Sunday and are the 20,000 to 1 outsiders to lift the trophy. And it's a mere 10,000 to 1 for Exeter, who must first overcome Manchester United. Impossible task? Well, as our sports editor Tim Hewitt reports, there is always hope.
This is what dreams are made of. Exeter's players posed with the FA Cup. They're unlikely to get their hands on it again, but their director of football, Steve Perriman, won it twice with Spurs. He believes his non-league players can travel in hope to Old Trafford.
You probably get 1 or 2 chances, 2 at the maximum in each game, each of those games, to make it happen for yourself. It's whether you take that chance or not. Hopefully we can.
There are precedents. In 1972, Newcastle took the lead against Hereford, but a memorable equaliser from Ronnie Radford paved the way for an extra-time winner for the Southern League side. Newcastle's opponents now are Yeading, who play in the Ryman League and are based near Heathrow Airport.
Really and truly, there's not much of Yeading. It's just a straight people more they strive through it. So to put Yeading on the map and to put the football club on the map is a great achievement by us.
Yeading attract an average crowd of 132, but although they're drawn at home, they won't be at their own tiny ground for the big match. Yeading will have their moment of glory here at the Queen's Park Rangers ground. Their chances are not good, but win, lose or draw, they're going to hit the financial jackpot. They expect to make £300,000, and Exeter possibly double that with their visit to Manchester. For non-league clubs, that really is like winning the Cup. Tim Hewitt, ITV News.
Tonight's big European Cup rugby clash was played in terrible conditions in Belfast. It was home side Ulster who coped best in the rain. They were 12-3 down at half-time, but fought back to beat Gloucester by 14 points to 12. Bryn Cunningham's try proving the difference between the sides. And that is tonight's sport. Nick.
Thanks, Felicity. I'll be back with an update on the headlines and a look at some of tomorrow's front pages. First, the news where you are.
Hello, good evening, I'm Gareth Owen. Welcome to Central News. An ambulance worker who used his job to trick his way into the homes of women and sexually assault them has been jailed for 7 years. Andrew Black posed as a doctor to make the visits. Some of his victims were pregnant, others as young as 16, and one who'd previously been raped. Bharat Patel reports.
Andrew Black began working here at Narborough in Leicestershire as a trainee ambulance technician in September 2002. Within 6 months, he was posing as a nurse, as a doctor and a consultant. Leicester Crown Court heard that he'd get his victims to strip naked and then carry out intimate examinations using medical equipment he'd stolen. Andrew Black visited one of his victims 15 times, telling her that she needed repeated examinations or she could fall seriously ill. The prosecution said that he was so audacious that very often he would carry out examinations in the bedroom while the woman's partner or husband would be downstairs. Andrew Black assaulted 20 women over an 18-month period. Police say he may have committed further offences.
Well, we hope we've got to the bottom of what's happened, but there is always a chance that there are victims out there. As this man was so convincing, they may not know they've been a victim of this man, and when they see the photograph, that may jog their memory, so we would ask them to contact us.
The prosecution said each of the victims had been left permanently marked and traumatised by what had happened, and each felt a sense of sheer anger and violation against the system which allowed this to happen. The NHS Trust said it was shocked and disturbed by the actions of Andrew Black. It added, "We're outraged that he used his position and the faith placed in him." It's promised to review procedures for handling patient information. Bharat Patel, Central News.
Well, next tonight, an East Midlands doctor says he's being hounded out of his surgery by thugs and vandals. Dr. Sklar has treated patients at his surgery for the past 18 years. Now, though, he says a campaign of violence and intimidation by local youngsters is forcing him and his staff to leave. Emily Rubin has the story.
The doctor's surgery at Bilborough in Nottingham was open for business today, but you couldn't tell by looking at it. Boarded up windows, graffiti on the walls. The vandalism's got so bad the doctor says he's moving out after 18 years serving the community. Patients say it's a disgrace.
Yeah, I think it is terrible. It's obviously kids that are doing it, and I think the parents need to take control of the kids, basically.
It's almost inconceivable that a doctor's surgery in the heart of a community should be subjected to such vandalism and intimidation. The windows are boarded up. They've been like that for 2 years because they kept getting smashed. And 2 weeks ago, vandals broke into the surgery and caused so much damage that it had to be closed for several days. Police say nothing was done for so long because witnesses in the area were simply too frightened to come forward. But after a concerted effort, 6 people have now been arrested. Today, the council admitted it had failed Dr. Sklar and now wants to evict the families thought to be involved.
I have to say that I'm not entirely happy with the way either the authority or the police have actually responded to this horrendous situation. I advocate taking action against council tenants who actually allow their children to perpetrate this, totally unacceptable behaviour. And I've suggested to the Assistant Director of Housing that we ought to be seeking possession of these properties.
The council has now promised £40,000 to improve security at the surgery and provide a guard overnight. But for Dr. Sklar and his staff, that could be too little, too late. Emily Rubin, Central News.
A £10,000 reward is being offered to find the killer of teenager Shane Miller. The police want to trace 4 men seen running away from the scene. The 18-year-old was brutally beaten about the head and stabbed repeatedly in the attack on Jedburgh Walk in the St Anne's area of Nottingham on Monday. Forensic teams have been searching the area after he was found injured in his home. Police hope the substantial reward will lead to a breakthrough in their investigation. Well, finally tonight, a 6-year-old boy is doing his bit to raise money for the Tsunami appeal. Josh Laxton had his bike stolen after Christmas, but was given a replacement by pub regulars. Well, now it's going to be raffled off to help the victims in Asia, as Alison Mackenzie reports.
Primary school pupil Josh Laxton back astride his favourite Christmas present. His bike was stolen one day when he was out playing with friends. Regulars at his mum's pub, the Navigation Inn in Derby, rallied round to buy him a shiny replacement. But then police recovered Josh's stolen bike. So the new bike is going to be raffled to raise money for the tsunami victims.
It's because we feel sorry for the people of tsunami disaster. We like to do everything we can for them. We say we've got nothing at all, no water and everything like that kind of thing. And we just want to do a charity do for them and raffles and anything like. Absolutely anything.
More than £350 have been raised so far. The bike raffle will help the total to climb even higher.
You don't realise how kind people are until you actually have a bad thing happen. And obviously these people in Asia have had a bad thing happen and we want to help them now.
Josh is simply delighted to be back on 2 wheels.
I'm really pleased because I got my bike back and I can do skids and tricks on it.
Reaching out to help those in need thousands of miles away. Alison Mackenzie, Central News.
Well, that's the news. Now for a look at the weather.
Central weather with BMIBaby.com.
Hi there. Wild, wet and windy outside tonight. Some extremely heavy rain moving down and taking the whole night to do it. And extremely strong winds, average speeds 30 to 35 miles per hour, but gusting at times up to 55. Atrocious driving conditions. If you have to take to the roads, you take it easy. Still extremely windy in the morning, the last of that rain around the region as well, but gradually pushing down to the south, and behind it brighter but still showery weather for the afternoon, and still very windy. We'll lose the gale force bit of the winds, but just dipping back to strong winds through tomorrow. Sunday just blustery, mostly dry for the daytime with sunny spells. Enjoy.
Central weather with BMIBaby.com, the airline with tiny fares.
That's it from the late team. Emily Knight will be here with our next bulletin at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon. Now, though, it's time to hand you back to the ITV News Studios in London. Good night.
Hello again. Tonight's main news. The Foreign Secretary Jack Straw said that as many as 440 Britons are now thought to have died in the tsunami disaster. The UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan visited Indonesia today, saying he had never seen such devastation in his whole life. And Northern Ireland's peace process is in turmoil after police said the IRA were behind last month's £25 million bank robbery. Time now for a look at some of tomorrow's front pages. The Times leads with the headline, "Thousands Missing as British Death Toll Passes 400. It reports that as well as the hundreds of Britons now thought to have died in the tsunami disaster, 2,000 are still unaccounted for. Its picture is of the missing Sally Geeson. A body was found in Cambridge tonight. The Independent simply says the missing and has a picture of Jack Straw checking a notice board in Thailand where families of victims place photos hoping for news. It also reports that 2,000 Britons are still unaccounted for. And the Sun's headline says Sally murdered. It reports, as we did, that a body has been found beside a cemetery close to where she disappeared on New Year's Eve.